Kia ora, g'day, welcome back once again. Hey, here with another reaction, obviously, to Mr. Ben Griffin. These reaction vids, just to give a little bit of context, so there's been some requests that have come through to me from people asking if I could react to these. So I think this video is maybe 9 years old, this one here that we're looking at, The Making of a Modern British Soldier by Ben Griffin, former 2-2 SAS operator. And they've been kind enough to offer financial remuneration, for want of a better term, for me to give my 2 cents on these. Now, I haven't watched these videos like the other videos, and it's a heavy topic. So they've got a list of things, questions, and they've also got some key times of where they want me to try to react from. And a lot of this stuff that you'll see, I'm going to try to compile this all into one video and provide my reaction to Ben Griffin's talks on torture and capturing innocent civilians and that sort of thing from his time with 2-2 and some of the raids. I think in particular it centers heavily around his time in Iraq. So if you're here for this, then let's jump in. Right, so this first part that I've been asked to react to is from 42:54. So you can see we're nearly at that now. It's 42:53, 42:54 to 1 hour 43. So this is the first part of the reaction. Then again from 1 hour 3 minutes 55 seconds to 1 hour 10 and 50 seconds. So we'll do these parts first and see how we go.
That was the process that we were running in Iraq. One where everyone could just say I was doing my job. No one got to see what was going on. I never went to one of these secret prisons. I never physically saw someone being tortured. The MI6 guy never saw us raiding that person's house. And this is what we were doing. And this started to have an effect on me. As someone who'd grown up watching those films, asking my granddad, can I see your medals? Reading those comic books. Britain is a good country. Britain fights bad people. We go to war for the right reasons. Going to those people's night after night into their houses and destroying their lives started to have an effect. We got sent on a job outside of Fallujah one night. I think we were in helicopters that night, and we got into someone's house, and I could hear the radio communications going on. I think I was in one of the helicopters just circling that night. And our guys had got in there and interrogated a young man with his young family. And it turned out that he had said to them that he had had enough of the war. He wasn't an insurgent. He'd actually got this farm off his uncle because he wanted to get out of Fallujah and keep his family safe. And I think our guys probably interrogated him for maybe 20 minutes. All his paperwork added up. All the stories added up. And our commander on the ground that night said, we're not going to take you in. Got on the radio, told our commanders, we're not bringing this person in. The soldier will obey orders without question. When we got back to the base, our commander, who was a major, so not someone insignificant, was taken to have a chat with the next person up and told in no uncertain terms, if we tell you to bring someone in, you bring them in. The next night, another unit was sent in to get that same person. So you started to realise that it didn't actually matter what this...
I think, sorry, I hit pause and it didn't pause. I think just quickly, my thoughts where he mentions and emphasises a soldier will obey orders, do as they're told basically, without question. Part of my experience anyway, part of what makes a Special Forces soldier or an SAS soldier in Ben's case and other operators within that space or within that sphere that make it into those units a little bit different, I suppose, for want of a better term, is that it's referred to as a thinking man's soldier. You ask questions. And I don't know if that's how 2-2 rolls, if they are just, yep, if your boss tells you something, then that's just, you just do it without question. yeah, I would. Maybe that is. And I guess maybe that might be where some from the outside that look in and go, yeah, soldiers just become robots and they just do as they're told. They just follow orders, right or wrong. They just follow the orders. I never really experienced that. I saw people ask plenty of questions of things. Yeah, so I mean, but I wasn't there with Ben and his team, and if that's what he said that they did, then so be it. Their leader, after the 20 minutes or so of interrogating or questioning this person that they found in a sounds like a rural area of Fallujah or out of Fallujah, it sounds like, yeah, they made an assessment and they decided we're not taking this guy in. Now he's getting bailed up from what Ben is describing, and they've sent out another team to go grab this guy again, which is disappointing if that's the case, because I mean, it comes back to that trust piece again. The alliance, the coalition, whatever you want to call it, they've trusted and sent Tutu out there in the first place. Yep, they've given information, but Tutu have done, no doubt they've done their due diligence and they've gone through their process and they've discovered and checked and verified that this person does not need to be detained and taken in. But from Ben's experience, that decision has been overruled and they've sent out another team to go grab this guy, which is, yeah, I can understand how and why that would be maybe building up some frustration and disappointment for him and maybe for some of the other operators as well. Let's crack on.
Decisions you made, this process was going to carry on. It was going to carry on no matter what you said, what you did. Also, most of the times we went into someone's house, we were given a name and a photo. It was very rare that we actually found that person. It was very rare that we found the person we were looking for. We'd go into someone's house, they wouldn't be there, and we did one or two things. We would take all males of military age from that house, no matter if we wanted them or not. Just by being in that location, they were guilty, into the system. The other option, after doing that, was that if it ain't this house, it must be next door. We must have got this slightly out wrong. I was on jobs personally where we went through 3 houses in a row in one night. A mate of mine did 7 houses in a row, looking for these terrorists. All of the males that we found in those buildings would end up in the prison system. I reckon about 1 in 20 jobs I did in Iraq, we actually found someone we were looking for. All the rest of it was just people who got caught up in it. And I've read reports since from guys who were interrogating people inside of these secret prisons, and they reckon that only 5% of the people we picked up were actually insurgents.
Wow. There's some big claims in there. Like, well, I don't know if claims is the right word. Statements. I'll run with that. That feels a little bit better when I use that word anyway. But those are some big statements. What's he spoken about? Is sort of, he used inverted commas when he says when we went looking for these terrorists. Yeah, well, hey, that was part of the job, and based on the intelligence that's coming through, like, you don't know. It's like all the intelligence that led to the Iraq War in the first place, So we won't keep going over that. But man, when he says 1 in 20, he reckons 1 in 20 were probably actually people that they were looking for that were caught. That's another big statement. Like, holy heck, 1 in 20, like out of the hundreds, I don't know, maybe thousands of people. What does that equate to? 10, 20, 30, 40 out of thousands? Who knows? Or 10 out of hundreds? That's not a lot if that statement is accurate and true. And then to talk about or to mention that there were people that were doing these interrogations, I think he said secret interrogations, of people, is like 5% or something. Again, another huge statement. I suppose where I'm going with that, and just trying to, and probably maybe not doing a great job of it, but trying to reiterate what he's just spoken about, is if that's the case and he's gotten this information from people, then clearly there's a bunch of people that know about this stuff and who don't have the same, I guess, level of courage that Ben is showing to come out and put this stuff out there, if that's been their experience, if that's what they've seen. So again, just absolute respect for Ben in terms of what he's done in sharing, what has not sat right with him. Like I said, high value set, integrity, character, all that sort of stuff with regards to operators that want to go and serve in those units. And that's not to say that what he is saying is 100% true and gospel. Like he's mentioned in the HR podcast, there were 20, 30 other operators. I haven't seen 20 or 30 other operators come out and explain and or state the same things. So it can be, it doesn't mean that it's not true though, what Ben is saying. So it can be lonely, it can be hard if you're the only person, and for whatever reason there may be other people that just don't feel comfortable or don't yet have the courage maybe to come out and be as bold and as brave as what Ben is doing or has done. So anyway, let's jump back into this some more.
I started to sort of question what we were doing. When you're inside someone's house and the family are looking at you as you're trashing their house, taking their stuff, and they're looking at you, and you can see the look in their eyes, and that look in their eyes says, what are you doing? What are you doing to me? Why are you doing this? It starts to have an effect. When you're taking people in night after night, who are not the people you're looking for, it starts to have an effect. When you're trashing all these people's homes and you start to think, even from a military point of view, aren't we just making things worse? If these people didn't hate us before, they're going to hate us now, surely. This went on and on. Lots of things happened in Iraq. I haven't got time to go through all the detail of it. But almost everything that was happening was telling me that this is wrong. Something had switched inside me and I was no longer willing to take a part in this. I remember one night coming back from some operation. I've been put into an American tank unit for the night to sort of direct them they were in an overwatch over us. And
just before we carry on, he's raising some really good points, which I think anybody, listening and or who has listened to Ben likely would have triggered some thoughts and feelings and emotions for themselves. One of the things that really stands out, I thought he was going to delve into a little bit more, because I recall from the HR podcast, he spoke about this a fair bit in terms of he felt like they were building or creating an insurgency. And so when he spoke about the people hating them, or if people looking at them, at what they're doing, trashing their home, coming in there like, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to us? And talking about if they didn't hate us before, they're surely going to hate us now. It's a powerful statement when you think about it. I can't help but put myself in that situation. And if that happened, there would be some really strong negative feelings towards that force, whoever it is that's coming in and doing this to our home at that time, regardless of what age I would be at. So it is a very, I think it just sort of backs up and confirms, or maybe not confirm, but backs up, supports his comment on the HR podcast of him feeling like they were fueling and creating an insurgency. Far out.
as we're going back, I'm in the back of this Bradley, I think, can't remember what tank it was. I could hear this noise. And I can hear them laughing. I said, what are you doing? He goes, oh, we're knocking the lamppost down. I said, what are you doing that for? He goes, because we can. And compared to all the other stuff I saw in Iraq, it was quite minor, but it kind of summed things up. It was like, we can do what we want, when we want. There are no rules. And who cares what the people think about us? I started, I suppose you could say, to become quite a bad soldier. I wasn't interested.
I wonder, again, I wonder if he or others just said, well, stop it, mate. Just cut that out. Like, there's no need to do that. All sorts, eh? There's all sorts in the army. Some good people, some bad people, some bloody doughy, no idea people, some very switched on, sharp people, and people that are there for the right reasons, people that aren't there for necessarily the right or good reasons. And hearing that experience, that just sounds like one of those doughy, blank and stupid idiots behind the wheel of whatever machine that they're operating, whatever tank or piece of mobile equipment, let's say, that they were in. But that's where you want to have a chat to those people as well. They're probably, I would imagine it's probably a younger person, early 20s, maybe mid-20s, but young. And it sounds like you just need to have a can you not do that? Let's just stick to the roads and the tracks, and we don't need to be driving along the edges to take out lampposts for no reason. Maybe easier said than done, but you got Ben and a group of hardened SAS operators. Pretty sure they're capable and competent enough to have a conversation with the tank operator, and still in as respectful a manner as they can. You don't have to be a prick about it either. If they're still going to be idiots and just tell you and blow you off and just tell you to F off or whatever, then the conversation might escalate. But again, you probably don't want to be trying to escalate the conversation with coalition forces when you're just trying to make your way back home either. But it sounds like clearly something could have and should have been said. And maybe something was, I don't know. I haven't heard Ben talk about it in the HR podcast, that something was said to those drivers, and I haven't heard him say it here, although I did just cut him off. I haven't heard him say it here whether or not he spoke to the operator of that machine and said, just cut it out, bro. Like, just get us home, stick to the road, and let's not worry about bowling over any more lampposts. It's not a long or a difficult conversation, I don't think. Maybe it happened, maybe it didn't. But if it happened, I'd like to think that something changed, and it would have been good if something like that did happen, if Ben explained it. Or did we just go, what are you doing? Bowling over lamppost, why are you doing that? Because we can. And then did we just shake our head and go, bloody Americans, or whatever the case might have been, Did we just allow that to fuel our maybe perception or negative thoughts of a country or of a defence force based on the actions of some bloody numpty or muppet behind the steering wheel, so to speak. Anyway.
Interested, whereas before I wanted to be the first person through the door, I wanted to put the explosives on the door, I was quite happy to be in a helicopter doing Overwatch. Didn't want anything to do with this. Was quite happy to be out of the way. Didn't want to get my hands dirty.
Sorry to stop it. Like that's an interesting mindset. I mean, if you're feeling that strongly about what you've been seeing and what you've been doing on the ground, and then you're just quite happy to be Overwatch, didn't want to get your hands dirty, your hands are still dirty. Like, that's my take. Right or wrong, your hands are still dirty. Why? Because in my head, what's going on. You know what's happening. And if you're saying 1 out of 20, you're pretty much almost every job or task that you're going out on to capture HVTs, you are going out knowingly or knowing that there's whatever that percentage works out to be. Sorry, I don't know. You're going out knowing that there's a high probability, 99% chance that the people that you're grabbing and the homes that you're blowing into, if this has been your experience leading up to causing you to be at this point where you just want to be Overwatch, or where you're quite happy to just be Overwatch in the helicopter, your hands are still dirty because you know what's going on. So maybe he's going to talk about that, but I don't think when you get to a crossroads, or maybe he's not at a crossroads yet, but when you get to a point of where, in my take, of where Ben's at and what he's describing, then you're either all in or you're all out. That's what it feels like to me. And obviously he got to that point where he said, I'm not doing this at all, and he's all out. But that's what I mean by other situations. If you're seeing things that are going wrong and people are sharing things with you, and then thinking man soldier, you challenge, you question, you have the courage to talk about those things. If that's not happening, and you're not getting the answers that satisfy your why, like why are we doing this, like he's touched on before, seeing his granddad's, asking his granddad for his medals, and seeing Britain fights only and fights bad people and wars that are for a good cause or good purpose, etc. To sitting on a helicopter, knowing what you know, and thinking that your hands are clean, doesn't cut it. And same when people see things that are wrong and they don't address it as soon as they can, as soon as it's safe and they're able to, instead of weeks, months, years down the track and going, actually, what Joe did over there in that time was bloody illegal, should never have happened, blah, blah, blah. But you're only bringing it up weeks, months, years down the track. It doesn't make sense. Like, bring it up as soon as, with the people on the ground first. I'm not saying go out and speak to the media and go, oh, they're doing all this, bloody, the sky's falling. Address it with the people where you're seeing these things going wrong. And yeah, make yourself heard as best you can. Easier said than done. I'm not in Ben's shoes. I wasn't in Ben's shoes. And he is the one who's had the courage to come out and share this stuff and be open about, what he did, what he didn't do, and what he was willing to do. So anyway, let's see if he talks about this a bit more.
After I'd been there for, 3 months, the CO came out to see us, sat us in a room like this. We were getting orders for a mission, some big mission. It was always, every time we were briefed, it was like, we're about to catch Zarqawi, who was the head of Al-Qaeda in Iraq at the time, First couple of times you hear that, you think, wow, we're going to go and get him. And then after about 10 times, you think, really? And the first thing that was of significance was a joint operation, British and American. We were given our rules of engagement. And those rules of engagement were the same that I had obeyed since I was a young soldier in Northern Ireland. You will only use lethal force if lethal force is about to be used against you. And that means that someone has to be aiming a rifle at you or firing at you. Someone could be holding a rifle down by the side, and that is not reason enough to shoot them, not reason enough to use lethal force. And then he went on to explain the American rules of engagement, which were, you may use lethal force if you are in fear of your life. And that is something quite different. Because no matter what the jobs you're on, and the fact that you never actually meet any armed resistance, because if you smash your way into someone's house at 1 o'clock in the morning with explosives, believe it or not, no one is up for a fight. Every time you go through that door, there's an element of fear. Of course there is. You don't know what's the other side of that door. And if your rules of engagement say that you can open fire if you're scared, that kind of explains why on those joint operations, every night when we came back in, we hadn't shot anyone, and our sister unit had maybe shot 2 or 3 people.
That's a big statement, because you're making an assumption there, I think anyway, like unless you were there on the ground with the sister unit that he's described in those moments, blasting through those walls and doors, whatever the case might be, it's a bold statement. Now, could it happen? Could there be some blanking dickheads out there that just want to get their kill count up? Yeah, 100%. That rules of engagement when you're in fear for your life, like that's, again, I've said when he was on the HL podcast with Hugh Kerr, that those rules of engagement are not the be-all and end-all that are going to protect you and save your life or save you from facing war crime allegations and all that sort of stuff. They are a guide for you to use. And then you're taking into consideration your training, your experience, if you have any, because some guys will deploy on operations without experience, just like I deployed to Iraq in 2003 without any experience in that theatre. So you're relying on your training, your experience, what you have from training, and any other deployments that you may have had. I had a peacekeeping, basically, deployment in East Timor, even though we did go out to the border looking in case there were any baddies wanting to cross over into East Timor as part of Recce Platoon, but we never came across any. And then you've got the people around you and your leaders, and going through and trying to draw on all of that stuff as much as you can, as well as the situation, that taking in that information that's happening when you're going in. You're using that to build your picture, to make a decision and an assessment. Do I need to drop this person or not? And so I think it's a bit unfair, the statement to say that because their rules of engagement were you can shoot somebody if you're scared. I think that's oversimplifying it far too much, and I don't think that's a fair statement. It's Ben's experience anyway, and it's his thought. This is what he's seen. This is what he's heard. when he's saying, hence why we didn't shoot anybody. And that, full credit to them if they didn't. But then also, I'm not to say, that's bad that the sister unit, whether he's talking about American forces or whoever, that because they shot 2 or 3 people when they went out, that they did something wrong. The other part, believe it or not, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning when you blast in the wall or a door of a home or of a place, and he says, believe it or not, nobody's up for a fight. Yeah, that's, because they're not expecting it. But the reality is as well, if there are bad people in there, they are going to scramble to try to get to their weapons as soon as they can. Just like friendly forces or coalition forces would. If we got caught with our pants down and somebody blew in a wall, we're going to be up trying to scramble to get to wherever our kit is so that we can get into the fight and try to work out, who this is that's just caught us with our pants down. So there's a whole bunch of things in there, man. But I'll come back to this because otherwise I'll take up all the time again.
And once in a while you'd think, well, okay, they obviously came up against some pretty hardcore insurgents who were ready and waiting. But when it happens 3, 4, 5, 6 times, you start to question that, whether that's true or not. But the CO went on to say something even more significant, I think. He said that this was the first war he was involved in that we weren't going to win. Quite interesting to hear from CO. And then he went on to say that he was worried that we were becoming the secret police of Baghdad. And for me, those words were like a hammer blow. I'd already felt this, seen it, but to hear it spoken by someone of such high standing was like a hammer blow. Thinking, back to when I was a kid, Britain's a good country. Britain goes to war for the right reasons. We're the good guys. We defeat the bad guys. They torture. They kill indiscriminately. They massacre, carry out genocides, and we're the people who stop that. And I looked around the building that we was living in, and it was a villa on the banks of the River Tigris, where one of Saddam's henchmen used to live. And I looked at the guy who was working for us, carrying out sort of interpretation and brutalising people in Iraqi. I started to think, well, maybe he was working for Saddam. And then you look at the prisons we were using, Saddam's prisons. You start to think, who are these people we're going after? Maybe they're the same people that Saddam used to go after. And it became apparent to me that we had replaced one evil dictatorship with another, us. And it became unbearable. It wasn't just me, there were other people who felt the same. I remember going into a slum one night, huge amount of explosives put on the door, we're all stacked up ready to go in, and the roof almost came off. When we went inside the building, it's full of kids on the mattresses. They were all walking around sort of like dumbfounded, couldn't hear, like deafened by what we'd done. No one was killed that night, I don't know how. And a huge row erupted when we got back to the base about the use of explosives in civilian areas. We were always operating in civilian areas. Some people were saying, we should keep this to the minimum. We don't want to hurt anyone. This would be counterproductive. And other people were saying, fuck them, as long as we're not hurt. So there was a real divide. One night we got sent out into a village and brought...
So it does sound like there was some bold, I don't know if courageous is the word either. Sounds like there were some robust conversations happening anyway in and around that space. But man, yeah, that'd be, especially as a parent, you blowing into a home and if it's just full of just children that he's talking about. I don't know, what was it, an orphanage or something? I don't know. But that would definitely make you question the intelligence that you're getting and why it is you'd be blowing into a home full of children, built up residential areas. I can understand the thoughts around from both sides, trying to keep things to a minimum, not wanting to take out innocent civilians. And also, I can also understand the other side, the comment that he mentioned, F them, as long as our people are okay. I can understand that comment too, and that thought process. But yeah, when you're a special forces soldier, there's your SF because of some of the not only because of some of the training, but because of your ability to be more surgical in your application of the work that you do. That's my thoughts anyway. That's my experience in terms of the training that we would do. Hence why the shooting, hence why charge placement, hence why everything that you go through in order to qualify to be an operator in an SF unit is because of that ability to be surgical with what it is that you do. Not to just be a shotgun and pray and spray, or spray and pray. So yeah, that's heavy and that's sad, just listening to what he's talking about here. We'll jump back in.
Captured so many people, bearing in mind that we were supposed to be after specific people. We were this surgical tool that was being used. We captured so many people that it took hours for us to ferry them back to the base in the helicopters. We got back to the base, lined them all up, old and young. I think one of the guys was even disabled. And an American intelligence officer went along, him, right, take the rest back. It was almost farcical. But it wasn't farcical for those people that we'd captured. Imagine that. The people who were held ended up in a secret prison system and were tortured. The people who were sent back, what was their life back? What was their life like when they got sent back? Imagine the questions. Why are you back? What's happened to my husband? Have you cut a deal with him? I got sent home on leave, and every day I'd go through the same thought process. I knew that what we were doing in Iraq was wrong. Not just militarily wrong, because it was creating more enemies than we were eliminating, but also morally wrong. Smashing our way into people's homes, terrorising families, taking people away to be tortured. And I knew that I couldn't do it any longer. Every day I'd go through this same process and come to the same conclusion. I can't go back. How am I going to get out of this? And I went through all sorts of different options. At one point, I was just going to buy a plane ticket, fly off somewhere and not come back. I thought, I can't do that. Then I thought, right, I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to write a letter to my CO and tell him why I'm not going back to Iraq. I wrote the letter. I thought, I can't do this.
Yeah, you can't just go AWOL. I mean, you could. People have done it. That's why they have it as a thing whereby you can end up in prison, as far as I know, if you do choose to go AWOL. But yeah, it wouldn't be something that I would imagine that he would want to do, being a British citizen, wanting to travel in and out, family connections, I would assume, friends, life, etc. Writing a letter to your CO, I don't see why not. I'd probably, if you're feeling that strongly about it, you'd probably go through your chain of command, I would imagine. Your patrol commander, your SSM, your patrol commander, your troop sergeant, your troop commander, then to your SSM, then to the OC, before it elevates to the CO, is sort of probably the structure, if it's the same sort of structure, if it's similar, but you'd probably go through a chain of command, your hierarchy of command anyway, before jumping straight to the CO. So yeah, anyway, let's see what he does and how he gets to that point.
So after about a week, I went into the regimental HQ, spoke to the clerk. I need an interview with the commanding officer. And he looked at me and he said, "Is this about leaving?" And I was thinking, is it that obvious? You know, has he been reading my emails that I never sent? Anyway, I got an interview with the CO. I told my girlfriend at the time, I'm probably going to end up in the jail for this. And went in there and he said, "Griff, what's this about?" I said to him, I was so nervous. I was more nervous going into that room than I was during any time in Iraq. It was like standing outside a headmaster's office times 100. And I was so nervous, so unsure about what was going to happen, that I needed to keep this simple. So I just kept on saying to him, I'm not going back to Iraq and I'm not serving under American command. And it didn't take him long and he said, right, okay, well, we're going to need to sort this out. I want you to go home, come back tomorrow. And I was looking at him thinking, is this a trick? You know, expecting the trap door to open, got outside the office. Are they going to release the dogs? Got outside the gate, got on the phone to my girlfriend, yeah, They told me to go home. Anyway, over the next I don't know how long it lasted, 2 months maybe, I was interviewed by about 5 different officers. And at first they thought that maybe I was pulling a trick because I'd been offered a job in Iraq. That's what they thought, with one of these mercenary companies. And it soon became clear to them that's not what I was up to. You know, when I was in Iraq, another aspect of what was going on was that there were huge numbers of white Western contractors out there. So people not in the military. There was all sorts of people, oil engineers, electrical engineers, lawyers, bankers, the whole sort of spectrum of Western corporate interests. And they were all guarded by former soldiers. And you could always tell them because they were quite brash, you know, they'd have a pistol hanging off their thigh, you know, a big Jeep with a machine gun on the top. And it actually smelt like a gold rush town. That's what it looked like. You know, I wasn't in San Francisco during the gold rush, but I imagine it was a similar kind of atmosphere. There was this sense that there was a lot of money to be not made, taken. You could smell it, you could sense it. This kind.
There was definitely a fair bit of money to be made. If it was available to be taken, I never saw it. But definitely having the opportunity to get into that private sector, yeah, there was a fair bit of money to be made at the time. So he makes a really good point. Interesting to hear his conversation, how nervous he felt going in to see the CEO. I could imagine. Oh no, actually, I couldn't imagine how he must have felt. But I'm glad that he shared that
kind of grab going on. And one of the aspects of my service in Iraq was that I felt that we were somehow involved in this, that through our action we were pacifying people so that these other people could come in and take as much as they could. Anyway.
Sorry to cut him off. One thing I forgot to mention is I still don't understand why he felt that he was going to end up in jail for speaking with the CEO, being honest. So making an appointment, speaking with the CEO, being honest about where he was at. I don't want to go back to Iraq and I don't want to be under US command. You know, I don't see a reason, not for a military reason or a civilian reason, why he would end up in jail. So I'd be curious to know, maybe he talks about it, I'd be curious to know why he thought that. Maybe he thought he's been insubordinate or disobeying orders or commands or whatever, which is serious. But in this case, it sounds like he's front-footing it. He's thought about it and he's going, hey, listen, I don't want to do this. I can't do this. Yeah, I think it'd be a brave CEO or anybody to want to put somebody in jail for telling the truth about where they're at. I don't know.
So I got accused of this, and you know that didn't stand up for too long. But the most difficult interview I had was with the Padre in the British Army. We call our chaplains the Padre. And got taken into this room and said, "Oh, Griff, this is all part of the process. You've got to be interviewed by this Padre." And he started off by saying, there was many people like you on the way down to the Falklands, people who were scared to fight. As I've met people like you before, but at least they did their job when we got down there. And I was trying to explain to him that when you're sneaking up to someone's house in the middle of the night, armed to the teeth.
That Padre's lucky he still had all his teeth by the sounds of things. I mean, good on him, having courage and being brave to say that. Maybe that is what he's seen. But for the Padre, man of the cloth, whatever you want to call them, to have the gall to say that to somebody who's gone through what they've been through to get to a unit like that and then has deployed on multiple operations, and then to accuse them of not wanting to fight because they're, making it sound like they're scared. Oh, man. Yeah, Padre or not, glasses or not, bro, you might want to just mind what it is that you say to soldiers. Maybe you've just been lucky and had a good run and gotten away with saying things like that to people and without any consequences because you've been able to hide behind that Lincoln cross that you wear. But, bro, not a good idea, could come a crump for you one day if that person is still around, still spouting the same types of messages. That's just my 2 cents anyway. Maybe that gives you an insight.
Using explosives to get in someone's house whilst they're asleep. The threat to you is minimal. The threat to us in Iraq was minuscule compared to what it was to the civilian population. And he couldn't grasp this, that this wasn't about the chance of me getting shot on the way into someone's house. This was about what we were doing to people. And years later, I've spoken to many veterans who've been through similar processes to myself. And they've all had the Padre interview, and they've all had a similar experience. A mate of mine who refused to go back to Northern Ireland in the late 1970s, early 1980s.
What is with you fellas, you Padres? Hopefully you have watched this and then you can blink and pull your heads in terms of the supposed counsel and guidance and wisdom that you think you're imparting. Maybe have a listen to the soldiers first, like a real listen, before casting your stones. Hey, isn't that a scripture reference somewhere?
Was told by a Padre, you leave the army, you'll be dead in a year. I can see you're going to commit suicide. Another mate of mine who had applied for conscientious objector status for refusing to deploy to Afghanistan, after an interview with a naval chaplain, that chaplain wrote a report about him saying that Mr. Lyons, or Seaman Lyons as he was at the time, could not possibly have a conscientious objection to the war in Afghanistan because he is of no faith. And these stories go on and on. And if you want to know a bit more about Padres within the British military, everything you need to know about them is written on their cap badge, through God conquer. It's not a very Christian message, but that's what they wear.
Wow, I haven't seen that in the Padres in NZ, or actually I don't even remember seeing a Padre in Australia. There probably was one, but haven't seen any of them wear a cap with those words on it, through God conquer. Yeah, bloody hell. I don't know, that seems a bit, seems like a bit of hypocrisy or being a hypocrite, kicking around saying that they're two soldiers, Navy, Air Force, Army, whatever, attacking. I think attacking, it probably sounds like a good word in this case of an individual's casting judgment and attacking a person's ability to deploy on operations because labeling them as scared. Holy heck, saying that you're going to kill yourself. Like, what sort of school do you need to go to become a Padre like that? Like, you just go make your own hat, put through God conquer, and then just slap that on your head and walk around. Bloody hell. Anyway, this is nearly the first part of this piece that the request came through, and then I'll skip ahead to the other parts.
So after a couple of months of this, I was told, you are now released from army service. I wasn't punished. I was given the full set of benefits that I'd accrued during my time in the army, and was even sent on a course. I was sent down to London to find somewhere to live at their expense. And I think what was supposed to happen then was that I was supposed to go walking quietly off into a security job, not say anything else about Iraq, and get on with my life. When I left...
Okay, so that's the first part of where I've been asked to react up to. Cool that he got let go, full benefits, everything. I think what he's maybe alluding to, they probably thought he was just going to go off quietly, go into a security job and then live his life. But clearly, I don't think that's what he's done. He's come out being quite active in terms of the Veterans for Peace space. I'm pretty sure he's retired from that now because I've been starting on a follow-up interview with him and Hugh Kerr on the HR podcast, where, I think he pretty much retired in 2019 or whatever it was from that space. It may have been a bit later, but that number jumps out of my head for some reason. But heck, a lot to unpick in there. This is nearly 45 minutes. And a lot of that has been me talking, giving my 2 cents, actually. So apologies for that. But I've been asked to try to put this all together into in and around this stuff into one video. There are some questions which I'm going to scroll into and then just give my my take on those questions that came through. Where are we? So that's that. Here it is. So from the interview, I've probably done this, not probably, I haven't really put them in the right place, but I'll look to go through these now. This was on the back of people hating them. Ben's comments, if they didn't hate us before, they're going to hate us now, surely. The question here to me is, if a country had invaded New Zealand, you could say New Zealand or Australia, because I've been fortunate to serve in both of those defence forces and live in both those countries, and blessed and privileged to have dual citizenship. And their SF unit had taken you and male relatives away to be tortured despite being innocent, how would you feel? Bro, I'd be gutted. I'd probably have a hatred. I'll be honest. I'd probably have a hatred for that, whether they were special forces or not. I probably wouldn't know, depending on, the age. There is no age here, but if somebody had done that, taken you male relatives away, if I'm an adult, yeah, I'm going to be. I probably, if something like that was happening, depending on the situation, I may have ended up dead if I'm an adult, just through likely fighting back, and not being happy about what's about to happen, unless, you're just completely caught unawares and unable to do anything, and then getting handcuffed and then taken away. But yeah, I would personally, have a hatred for that, especially if you're innocent and I've done nothing wrong, and I know my family members are innocent and they've done nothing wrong. That's where I would be. Would you become an insurgent to fight them? Great question. I would say probably depending on what happens. It would depend on if I'm being tortured, and if I know my family members have been tortured, and then maybe I'm released, but some of my family members who I still know are innocent, but they haven't been released and they continue to be tortured and held for a long time, yeah, possibly. Probably I'd be looking to try to find a way to, again, depending on how old I am. If I'm a little child, well, then I'm not going to be able to do much. Although that's probably what I would think. But if I'm an adult, because these questions don't give that context, then I'm probably going to look to try to take some sort of action personally. That's what I would. Yeah, that's what I feel like I would do. Right or wrong, I think there's probably plenty of people that would feel the same way. Maybe not. Next on, do you sympathise with Iraqis who did due to this experience? Do I sympathise with Iraqis who did due to this experience? I don't know if sympathise would be the word that I would use. I don't know if I'd sympathise with them, because I'm just combining a couple of things here. That previous question in relation to me, would I become an insurgent? I wouldn't be looking for sympathy. I'd be looking to try to get some payback, or get my family members back, is probably what I'd be looking to do. Sympathising with Iraqis who may have become insurgents due to the experiences that they encountered. What I would say is, I wouldn't sympathise. I think I could understand why they'd get into that, or why they chose that path. But if they've gone that path, and I'm still fighting in the good guys of the coalition, and they've done stuff, and we've been tasked to go in and get them, and we've, hopefully we've got good intelligence this time, then I'm going in to get them. Like, the stuff aside, in terms of what's happened, I get it. I can understand, but I definitely wouldn't sympathise, because some of the things that may happen and that the insurgency has done is not great. Suicide bombers, using children, using women, using families, taking things by force. You could say, well, that's what the soldiers and stuff have done by taking people. And based on Ben's experience, that sounds like stuff that has happened. And based on me and how I would feel if that happened, yeah, I mean, man, if the tables are turned and if that's what's happened to me, I'm going to be pretty upset, and I'm going to be looking to try to do what I can to get back. So from those perspectives is why I say I could at least acknowledge and understand, yep, that's maybe what's turned them. But I wouldn't, if I was still a soldier fighting against that stuff, I'm not going to be sitting back and saying, oh, it's okay, I understand because this happened to you. It's like, well, no. Unfortunately, you were innocent. Now you're doing the stuff that we're here to try to stop. And that is what it is. So it's either you or it's us. So that's that piece. So here's some questions on the SOS ROE and criticism of Delta Force ROE when Ben suspects lead to civilian deaths. Yeah, I think I touched on that. It's a pretty big statement, and I think it's a bit unfair when he talks about if you feel in fear for your life. ROEs are a guide at the end of the day, regardless of which country you come from. That's just my take. Because I'm not relying on the words on an ROE card to save my life or the life of my mates. If there is threat and danger or immediate or imminent threat or danger to my mates or to myself, I'm not looking at the card. I'm not trying to recall word for word what that is. There's no cards out. My eyes are up, my ears are on. I'm looking at the threat, the target, the situation, the environment. And if I need to, I'm tracking my weapon on whoever that person or those people are. And I'm making the decisions based on the training, the experience, the trust that I have in the team, and the ROE, which is a guide. But yeah, I'm not pinning my mates' lives or my own life on trying to follow that thing to a T. So that's my take on that. I think it's a bit unfair to a degree with regards to, I think it's unfair in terms of saying that we didn't kill anybody, but the other coalition forces have gone out and they're killing 1 or 2 or 3 every job. Again, is that happening every job? Have you got the information? Like, I'm not trying to belittle Ben and his experience, but unless you've been out on those jobs with those other teams, and unless you've got all the information, like there's the patrol reports or whatever, if you even have access to those patrol reports around how many were killed, did it happen every job? Because it sounds like there was a heck of a lot of jobs, and that's a lot of reports to go through. Then I think that's just too big a statement to make. Do you agree Delta's ROE was bad? Do I agree Delta's ROE? No, I don't. I don't agree that their ROE, their rules of engagement, was a bad one. I think, if anything, for the caliber of soldier that is a Delta Force operator, with their training, with their experience, with their competency, with just all that conflict experience that they have, and the types of people that they select to go in there, like that, as far as I know, you have to be invited to do a Delta Force selection or DevGru. You can't just apply off the street and go, yeah, I want to go there. So it gives me confidence, and I think it would give other people confidence in terms of the idea and the process that they have to go through to select the right types of people. They do a whole bunch of vetting checks from what I've seen on previous interviews with other USSF and Delta Force operators and DevGru, and they do their checks around the other units where that person has been to what's this person like, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, words to that effect that I've heard, and they do their due diligence and research on a person before they allow them to come on to even get to the selection. So to me, that gives me confidence that they're selecting high caliber individuals who are thinking soldiers. They're not just out for kill counts or anything like that. So, hey, don't get me wrong though, there could be bad apples. There are bad apples in every unit, right? And there could be some that might slip through the cracks, possibly. But given the success of units like Delta and the processes that they have in place, it's probably few and far between. I'm not going to say that it's perfect and that they don't have any of that. There may be, and there may have been in the past, just like any unit. No SF unit is perfect. And yeah, there's bad apples in everyone. So I don't agree that Delta's ROE was bad at all. I think it's a good guide in the hands of the right people. And I think Delta Force operators are people that have enough nous and skill and competency to use those ROEs in an honourable way, is what I would say. Well, that's what I like to think anyway. The CO22 SAS said they would lose the war in Iraq in a speech to his men. Interesting. How significant do you find this comment by then 22 SAS CO? Yeah, pretty significant. If I was sitting in the room and the CEO comes out and says, "Men, we're going to lose this war in Iraq," I'd probably be going, "Well, what are we here for then? Like, what are we hoping to achieve by being here?" Not that I'd be saying, "Oh, I want to leave and go home then," but it would be nice to just sort of know, okay, if you're adamant that we're going to lose, if everybody's saying that we're going to lose, why are we here? What are we hoping to achieve? And if the answer, then from there it would depend on what the answer would be from the CEO and other leaders. But our CEO never said that. Our OC never said that. I never came across that piece. But this, I think, would have been, a few years down the track in terms of what Ben is speaking about. And there's a bit of a picture starting to build, and things probably feel like and seem like it's not going the way that they were hoping. So, yeah, it's a significant comment by the CEO. Was the CEO right to say this? Yeah, that's just my opinion. The CEO's right and entitled to say whatever he wants. Is he right to say it? Yeah, that's his call. I mean, again, I wasn't there during this time or in this briefing. Listening to Ben recount and give a second-hand account of what the CEO said to the group of men. Is he right to say it? We probably need more context to what else the CEO has said. What did he say leading up to it? What did he say not only in that moment when he said we are going to lose this war in Iraq? What did he say immediately after that to support or provide context and rationale to his statement at that particular point of his briefing to the soldiers? You know what I mean? So there's not a lot of context. Ben doesn't give a lot of context in and around that conversation. He doesn't give rationale as to why the CEO said it. He doesn't give context in terms of what the CEO says immediately after to support his statement, his claim, because it's a big claim from your commanding officer of your regiment to come out and say, we're going to lose this war in Iraq. And I would like to think that the officer would have provided a bit more rationale and context to it, and or operators, SSMs, troop commanders, sergeants, corporals, troopers would have probably asked the question, what do you mean? What makes you say that? Or why? Or what are we here for? Just some simple stuff like that. From a factual perspective, but in principle, should a CEO tell his men that kind of negative opinion? I think a CEO should be honest, and this will either ruffle feathers or, people will go, no, they can't. The CEO, the leadership, strategic, oversight, blah, blah, blah. There's certain things that they can't tell the troops and the soldiers, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that may be the case. But I personally would prefer a CEO that's going to be honest and tell us what the go is. What's the story here? Like, what are we doing? From a factual perspective, but in principle, should a CEO tell his men that kind of negative opinion? And this question here, negative opinion, that's probably the key part. It's his opinion, regardless of whether there's some context or rationale for why it is that he's giving that opinion. If it's fact, well then yeah, you definitely, I would have loved to have heard from Ben what those facts were, and even just what the context or rationale was from the CEO, but as I mentioned, I didn't hear that. Should the CEO tell their men? Yeah, I think just be honest. It's one of the values of the unit, right? Honesty and integrity. So there's lots of different ways that people can and likely do massage things to suit the narrative. Withholding information isn't necessarily lying, or doesn't necessarily mean that I've not been truthful. There's lots of ways that you can slice and dice that thing to suit your picture or your message that you want to get across. Negative opinion, yeah, I think just be honest with it. If it's negative, it's negative. If it's positive, it's positive, but tell the truth to your soldiers so that they know what they're dealing with. That's my take on that anyway. Worried they were becoming the secret police of Baghdad. Yeah, he spoke about that. Do you agree with Ben's dictatorship comment when he was speaking about all that stuff? Ben's dictatorship comment, that we were replacing one dictatorship with another. Yeah, big statement again. Some heavy stuff in there. For me, this bloody little hoary over here in NZ giving his 2 cents years after the fact. But I'm humbled by it, grateful that people have asked me for my 2 cents. I don't know that dictatorship is the right term. I think the dictatorship in terms of Saddam's regime was replaced with something, but I don't know that I would call it a dictatorship. I think it was an effort to try to create a democracy within that country that didn't really work out or pan out the way that it was hoped. And there were steps that were taken, right or wrong, to try to weed out those that might rise up against and counter this freedom and democracy, which sounds like it hasn't really worked out or didn't really work out the way it was, I think, probably with good intentions intended to. So yeah, I personally don't agree with the dictatorship replacing it with another one. I don't think that's what happened or what's happened, and I don't think that was ever the intent either. But yeah, Ben's experience and his observation and his thoughts, nobody can question them or doubt them because he was there on the ground and that's what he saw. So again, I appreciate him for coming out and sharing his thoughts. What we were doing in Iraq was wrong, morally wrong, smashing into people's homes, terrorizing families. Ben refuses to redeploy due to disagreeing with civilians being tortured and his unit taking them for this. Do you agree with Ben? What his unit was doing to civilians, taking them for torture, was wrong. If everybody that they took was an innocent civilian, and if they were all getting tortured, yeah, 100% I agree that's wrong. But what I think, well, not what I think, I don't know because I wasn't there, but what I think is that I don't know that Ben knows all of the details of each of those people. Depending on his role within the team, whether he's a trooper, a lance corporal, corporal, or patrol commander. As a patrol commander, he'd probably have more insight in terms of follow-up information and all that sort of thing. That's not to say that their patrol commander probably wasn't giving them debriefs, and as we could hear, Ben was talking about he was getting information anyway, so he was following things up by the sounds of things, being proactive, which is one of the things that they look for in operators within the unit, and he was finding out information from other people in and around what was happening with these people. So yeah, if you've been capturing civilians, innocent civilians, taking them in, handing them over, and they're getting tortured, and you know that that's happening for long periods of time, they've been detained for long periods of time and tortured during that process, yeah, I think that's wrong. Why? I wouldn't want that happening to me or my family or friends or people that I know to be innocent, if they're innocent, especially if I'm innocent and other people that I know are. I don't think anybody wants that to happen to them. So yeah, if that's what Ben saw and he's got all the evidence to support that, I would agree with that. I think that that's wrong and that shouldn't happen. If the Australian SAS had been taking civilians to be tortured, would you refuse to take part? Now there's another great question. All these questions are great. Would I refuse to take part? It's one of those what if questions, because it hasn't happened to me. I think in order for me to be able to answer that more honestly and realistically and authentically, I think I need to be in that situation to experience everything of what's happening. That's not saying that I'm putting my hand up saying, oh, pick me, I want to go and capture civilians and hand them over for torture so I can know and feel what that's like and then I can make a decision. That's not what I mean. There's a whole bunch of working parts. So the intelligence that you're getting, the briefings that you're getting, the picture that's been painted, the narrative that's been presented to the operators, all of that feeds into this, your mental prep, and then how you physically prepare, and then all the equipment that you take, and your ROEs and everything when you're going into that environment. If the Australian SAS had been taking civilians to be tortured, would you refuse to take part? I personally, I don't know if this is what's happened, but I would like to think, just based on my experience of what we did when we let Lincoln more than a dozen armed military personnel who were fighting against us, shooting to kill against us, when we let them go, I'd like to think that operators within the Australian SAS, if they knew about it, would question, would go, hey, these people are all civilians. It's been confirmed. Oh, Bob over here from Intel and Sue over here from intelligence and blah, 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 whatever, on both sides have said these people are non-combatants, they're civilians, their story checks out, their credentials check out, whatever it is. Would I refuse to take part? Yeah, I don't think any, well, I shouldn't speak for any, the question is for me. Would I refuse to take part? I personally would not want to be capturing civilians and then taking them, handing them over to be tortured. So that's what it's got here. SAS have been taking civilians to be tortured. Would you refuse to take part? Yeah. When I break that down into its simplest form, without being there on the ground, I personally didn't sign up and would not have signed up to join the Special Air Service to capture civilians, to hand them over to be tortured. That's not what I signed up for. Anything else, like fighting against armed bad people, looking to capture and or kill bad people that have done bad things, 100% sign me up. That's what I signed up for. But yeah, not to capture civilians. So yeah, break it down. I think I was overthinking it. Break it down to its simplest form in terms of the question. If the Australian SAS had been taking civilians to be tortured, would you refuse to take part? Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that. So, and I don't think any member in the unit would want to. What are we? We're over an hour. I'll keep rolling. Padre effectively calls Ben a coward, implying he was scared to fight in Iraq. Do you think Ben was a coward? No, I don't think Ben was a coward at all. I think that bloody Padre has got a lot to answer for. And like I said, I think I said in my reaction that Padre's lucky he still had all his teeth. And if he wore glasses, he's probably lucky his glasses weren't broken. Yeah, no way do I think Ben is a coward. If he was a coward, that what Ben's doing and standing up and speaking and talking about the stuff, although this has happened years ago, that's not the act of a coward, far from it. So, yeah. What do you think of the Padre speaking like this to Ben? Yeah, I thought it was disgusting, to be honest. And yeah, that Padre needs a slap around the ears. How would a Padre from the Australian SAS react to a soldier refusing? Yeah, I think I mentioned in there, I don't recall seeing and or speaking with or meeting a Padre whilst I was in the Australian regiment. That's not to say that there wasn't one, right? I know that they had them, seen them at dawn services on Anzac parades and that sort of thing, and they're giving, but I've never seen them in camp, so where they're like doing opening prayers and all that sort of stuff. But I've never seen them, I never saw one in camp anyway. And if I did, they were well disguised, put it that way. So, how would a Padre from the Australian SAS react? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they would react. I'd like to think that they would be more thoughtful and considered in their responses to, but I would have thought that about Padres in the UK military as well. Clearly, that's not the case, based on Ben's experience. All right. Okay, so now I'm going to carry on. I'm going to crack on with this. So this is going to be a long reaction. Apologies for that. But hey, I want to try to honour what has been asked and requested here as best I can because I missed it the first time. And this person's been kind enough to, like I said, contribute financially for my 2 cents on this reaction and bundling them together. So I'm going to skip ahead to 103, I think it was. Let me just double check. 103.55. So let's do that. 103.55. Let's go from here.
In London. So that's what I should have been doing. But after I left the army, I was at home. I was angry. about what had happened, what I'd been involved in. I couldn't really fully appreciate what I'd been involved in. Over the years, I've built up a bigger picture. Imagine that I was just the French policeman taking the Jew out of the house, and over the years you build up the picture, oh, this is what it was about, you know. And but quite early on, I started to feel this obligation, duty, to start talking about what was going on over there. Because I was watching the news back home, listening to politicians, listening to generals, talking about the war in Iraq, and knowing, not just thinking, knowing that what they were saying was a load of old rubbish. You know, they were talking about how we were winning and how we were introducing democracy and things were getting better over there. And I was thinking, is this the same war they're talking about? And I started to talk in public meetings, give interviews to the press. And this went on, you know, and I did think I was on my own for a while. And I got into all sorts of trouble. I won't go into that tonight. But it wasn't for quite a few years until I became aware of other people who felt or thought the same.
I'll just pause this here because I'll try and go through these in a bit better sequence than what I just did with the first part, but hopefully I covered off on those pieces that were asked. So in here he's talking about the politicians, generals talking about Iraq and saying that they're winning the war, and he's spoken there about that's a load of rubbish. Like, are they talking about the same war? And the question that's in here, for me, would you whistleblow over the Australian SAS taking civilians for torture? Yeah, I think, and it's bare bones, basic. If that's something that was happening whilst I was there, like, let's put it this way. Oh, the short answer is, I think I would. Like, if there's something and it's played on my heart and mind with regards to what I'm seeing there and what's happening, and I've been asking questions, though. So here's the thing. If I've been asking questions and trying to address that and get some answers to these questions sooner rather than later, not letting things go by for days, weeks, months, years, and then come out and go, oh, all of this stuff happened. I think that's just poor form on my part if I was to do something like that. At face value, if I've been doing all those things and still getting no answers, and or we're still doing the same thing, I would probably feel I like to think I would probably feel some sort of obligation, or probably feel compelled to say, hey, this is wrong. We need to stop doing this. If I've exhausted and tried every effort speaking internally within the unit, because I'm not wanting to go out to try to make the unit, which I think is awesome, look bad. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I would be wanting to try to get some answers. So on here, just to give a little bit, if they knew that their civilians are taking torture, what I was going to mention is, hey, if that happened like once or twice in a couple of raids where we went in and it was then discovered, hey, we got bad intel, these people are civilians, but they've been released, cool, no worries. I'd probably still be happy to a degree, depending, speak about, hey, yeah, we didn't always get it right in very broad general terms. We didn't always get it right. Sometimes we grabbed people that weren't actually part of the insurgency. But the good thing is we discovered that they were identified as being innocent civilians, everything checked out, and they were released. Cool. Because you're not always going to get it right on jobs. And that's just the reality. Okay, so I think there's not leeway, that's not the right word. I think there's scope and room to understand that even though you're surgical SF units, you're not always going to get it right. And that's for a number of reasons. Okay, intelligence could be one. That's not trying to point the finger and blame intelligence. It's not all their fault. Intelligence could be one. It could be we go to the wrong home. So the intelligence could be spot on, could be 100% accurate, bang on, and we somehow, under the cover of darkness, go to the wrong location and then try to conduct the task that way, which we conduct the task really well, but the people that we grabbed, who we thought we were grabbing, is actually not the people, because they were one house over or two houses over. So hopefully that makes sense. There's a whole number of things. Do you think Ben did the right thing whistleblowing? Well, I think for him, I think it's made him feel better and put him at ease. So do I think Ben did the right thing whistleblowing in terms of reputation of the regiment and or relationships or reputation of the American Special Forces. I don't think he's looking to intentionally damage the reputation of the Special Forces regiments in 2-2 and or Delta. I think here's a man who's just observed and been a part of and experienced what he's experienced, has not been convinced that what he was doing was right, and for him, he felt compelled to share it, to make it known. And right or wrong, I don't think that's for me or for anybody to be able to throw stones at or cast a judgment of, because there's probably a whole bunch of things that I've maybe spoken about, not just in military, but just things in general, where people may feel it's not my place to. But right or wrong, if I feel a certain way, which I like to think anybody out there, if you feel strongly about something, passionate about something, you feel a strong moral obligation towards something that doesn't sit right with you, then you're going to do what you feel is right. And I think Ben has done what he feels is right for him. So anyway, we'll carry back on with this.
I can't remember the exact year, but it was something like 2009 when Joe Glenton refused to go to Afghanistan, went AWOL, ended up doing some prison time. And
that's what I mean. If you're going, I don't know the name of that person, but yeah, if you go AWOL, like as far as I know, you can do some prison time for that from a military context. So that's why I would have found it hard for Ben going through the process, having an interview, etc. What I spoke about earlier.
At the same point, I was struggling with, the aftermath of Iraq, and I'd been sent to a couple of psychologists, kind of like what's called combat stress. It's down in Leatherhead, like a military charity hospital for people suffering with what they call PTSD. It's a whole big other issue. I don't call it PTSD. It's not a disorder to feel like this after going through that. It's just normal. Whilst I was at combat stress, I started to meet other veterans, not just from the war in Iraq, but from the Falklands and from earlier, who thought and felt the same as I did. And started to think maybe it was possible that we could form a group. And over the next couple of years, we wrote a few letters and we started to meet up. And in 2011, I was given a talk in Houseman's books about the problem of the military going into schools and trying to recruit our kids. And there was a guy at the back nodding away, and he looked like a kind of aging American footballer. Massive shoulders, massive jaw.
Sorry, that's just very quickly. That's interesting that he said, I think he was giving a talk. Did he say he was giving a talk opposing or giving his thoughts around military units going into schools to recruit? I remember the army coming into my high school and doing a recruitment presentation. I loved it. I thought it was great. I don't see anything wrong with it, personally, not even to this day, not even given everything that's going on, not even, listening to Ben's experience. I think the military, joining the military, there's far more good in it than there is bad. That's just my biased opinion. I'll make no secret, I am biased in that regard. And I think the Defence Force has so much more positive to add, to give to people than negative, because of my experience as a young person, but also other people that I know of who were far more mischief than me. And to see the change and turnaround in them, and to hear them talk about the changes and their gratitude for what the military gave them. These are people that didn't go to SF. There's people that just served in the regular army, but it changed their whole life around. Now, I get it. It's not like that for everybody, but man, my experience is far more good that happens. Taking the youth of today and putting them into a program. I think the UK have their junior leaders part where you can join at 15 or 16 years old, 16 I think, in the army, but you can't deploy on operations until you're at least 18. That's cool, man, because we got some blinking tutu youth here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and I think anywhere, who could do with some discipline, who could do with some routine, who could do with a nurturing environment, but that is firm but fair, to help them grasp what it is that they're doing some of the poor decisions that they're making to make better decisions as they grow up. So I've gone off topic here, but that was in regards to him just talking about the Defence Force going into schools and recruiting. I agree with this comment about post-traumatic stress, and then they've got disorder on the end. It's a cool comment. It's not a disorder to feel the way he is. I agree with that. I don't think that's a disorder at all. I'm not sure why the disorder piece is on the end. Post-traumatic stress, I get. Post-traumatic stress disorder, I'm not sure what the rationale is for that word being added in there. But anyway.
And afterwards he came up to me, he said, have you ever heard of an organisation called Veterans for Peace? I said, yeah, I have heard of them. And I told him, we're trying to get something started over here, like a veterans group, anti-war veterans group. He said, well, you could become part of Veterans for Peace. That was a guy called Barry Ladendorf. He's now the president of Veterans for Peace in America. And so rather than sort of like go through all the sort of birthing pains of setting up something completely new, we looked at their website, looked at all of their statement of purpose, statement of non-violence, and decided that this was actually what they were talking about was universal. It wasn't American Veterans for Peace, and none of their statement of purpose or principles of non-violence were specific to America. And so we set up a group, and we've been going now since 2011. We're up to about 190 members. And one of the most interesting things for me is the wide variety of people we've got. So
that's interesting. There's obviously already a group out there, which he's mentioned, a Veterans for Peace anti-war campaigning, I think is what he mentioned. I get the intent behind it and the thought, and it's not that I love war. It's not the case at all. It's just, unfortunately, it's the reality of the world that we live in. The world leaders who have been voted into these positions, or that somehow managed to stay in these positions for blinking for as long as they like. And I don't have the answers, but they don't seem to do a great job of preventing war. Like all that stuff continues to happen. That's just the ones that we know about on the media. Then there's a whole bunch of other ones that we don't know about that are happening within countries internally, etc. The anti-war stuff, unfortunately, the campaigning for that, I think the only way that could work is if the entire world felt the same way and chose to try to live that life. But the reality is that I don't think that's ever going to happen, and we don't see that today. Countries, superpowers, are still going to have their nuclear weapons. They're still going to be making advancements in regards to preparation, defense of, and or attack for military advantage. So, try as you might, it's not to say that it's impossible. When you have a passion and drive, and they can achieve and likely have been achieving some good things. I don't know without looking into it, but it's a hard struggle to try to get the world to buy in to a anti-war position or thought, because you're always going to have that skepticism, and people go, nah, they're trying to trick us to get us to lower our defences, and then they'll attack us, etc. I just don't think we're ever going to be able to stop those types of thoughts. But anyway, where are we up to? Let's carry on for a bit. So I've got to go to 1 hour 10 in this part.
Gruntled Iraq War veterans, post 9/11 veterans. Our oldest guy is Jim Radford. Excuse me. He was at D-Day as a 15-year-old on a merchant tugboat, and his job on this tugboat was to drag the landing craft off the beaches and then construct this Mulberry Harbour. That was his kind of task. And he had like this sort of grandstand view of D-Day. Wow. He later went on to join the Royal Navy and became a prominent member within the Committee of the 100, CND. He's been around for a long time. Jim was talking, actually I was out in America with him recently, and he was talking, and someone was mentioned that word, the fallen, which I hate. The fallen. That's what you see in a war film. Someone gets shot, they fall over, they die, don't they, peacefully almost. And we were talking about this term and how, just like aim at the centre of the mass or collateral damage, it's a term that hides the true nature of what's going on. And he started to tell a story, and that's the amazing thing about Veterans for Peace, is especially when we're on our own, people, it's not some sort of like swing the lantern, oh, listen to this. People just start talking about these things that they've been through. And he started talking about D-Day, and he said, do you know what, on the second day of D-Day, there were all these bodies, British bodies, on the beaches. And they got a bulldozer and bulldozed the whole lot into a big pile, and then just buried that pile. Now, I'm sure they, took them out afterwards. But that was what we're talking about. He said there wasn't any fallen. This is what it was about. It's brutal. Walter Heaton, who is in his 80s, was a national serviceman who deployed to Malaya in the late 40s. He was involved in attacking villages, burning their crops, burning their houses, and taking the villages to concentration camps. They weren't called concentration camps, but there was a big wire fence and some huts inside, and people weren't allowed out. It's kind of a concentration camp. Anyone who escaped was then hunted down, and people who escaped from that camp tried to get back to their village. They were hunted down, I think, by the Scots Guards, and were massacred in a place called Batang Kali. Also in Malaya, villages had their heads cut off by British soldiers. And when you hear these stories, people telling me about what happened in Cyprus, what happened in Northern Ireland in the early years, you start to realise that actually the history that you've been taught, the stories that you've heard, they're one side of the story. And then it's not just the war in Iraq or the war in Afghanistan that are decrepit, it's the whole lot, the whole lot of it. Even guys who've been down to the Falklands, and people often bring up the Falklands, well, that was a just war. Well, none of my mates who were there think it was just. None of them. And they're not even in VFP. These are not guys who are signed up to Veterans for Peace.
Pause that. Sorry, it's gone. Yeah, okay. Man, lots in there. So that's wrapped up. That's finished that off. There's a few questions in here. Spoke about the PTSD stuff. Set up UK Veterans for Peace group. It's got in here from this person that sent through this request that it closed down in 2022. Is that right? So, man, I'd have to do some looking into that. So 2011, it sounds like. I don't know if that's when it started, but I heard Ben mention something about 2011. And then somebody's trying to call. Sorry, mate, I'm busy. And then it's got in brackets here, it closed down in 2022, which is interesting and or a shame as well if it has. So with regards to the next question, what do you think of a group like Veterans for Peace? I think it's great if that's what they want to do and if that's what they're passionate about. Will it affect change? Man, I honestly, I don't think it will. Not on a scale large enough to avoid war, put it that way. Yeah, it would be great if it could, but I just don't think it will. I don't think it has the backing or the support or enough drivers, and it definitely doesn't have the world leaders coming together looking to back something like that. I think NZ has its own version. Not sure if they've got a Veterans for Peace. They might have here. I know there is a Veterans Association, but I haven't heard of a Veterans for Peace, but maybe there is here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. 108, someone mentioned the word the fallen. Yeah, I can't remember the name of the guy guy that was at D-Day, I think he mentioned, or somebody that was speaking in America talking about D-Day and speaking about the fallen, referring to soldiers killed. Yep. Ben hates this word. It's a term that hides the true nature of what's going on. Yeah, that's interesting. I was surprised when I heard him say that he hates that word. For the fallen. Yeah, I don't think the intent behind the use of the word for the fallen or words for the fallen and wanting to remember and honour people that have lost their life during war, on both sides of the conflict, or whatever the conflicts are, not just one side of it. I think it's done with reverence and respect and humility, and trying to, just take a moment, breathe, pause, think about the actions that have been laid for us to have the freedom that we enjoy, etc. So I don't think there's anything sinister behind it. But hey, Ben's opinion is his opinion. If he hates the word, he hates the word. And for the reasons, if he thinks that it hides the true nature of what's going on, again, that's his opinion. I don't think there's anything sinister in the use of the word or words for the fallen. The history you've been taught is one side of the story. Do you agree? I think he raised some good points in terms of, I think he said British soldiers lopping heads off. And we've heard Big Phil Campion talk about on other podcasts, when I think it was on the Team House, when he's giving his story about the Falklands and all that sort of stuff. And he said that he did some research. He didn't want to get into the politics, but he did some research on both sides to get a good understanding. And he said, yeah, as Brits, we did some poor things there. But both sides are doing and had done some poor things as well. So I think you probably can get fed one narrative, just like with anything. Our own national media can feed us one narrative. Other international media can feed us the narrative that they want us to have. I think we get a version of events or a side of a story no matter where we are, no matter what we do. And this is probably no different. Do I agree the history that you've been taught? Man, I can't even remember. They probably were trying to teach some history, but I don't remember receiving any history lessons as such on East Timor and Indonesia, on Iraq, on any of that sort of stuff. I don't recall. On Afghanistan, traveling in and around, I don't remember. Also, not only not being taught, but I don't remember me being proactively searching out information in and around why these things were happening. I just didn't. I wasn't wired that way. I, right or wrong, foolishly, naively, immaturely, wanted to take on board the information that I was being given, and based on the mission and the tasks and what we were seeing. So if I use my naivety as an example, when the weapons of mass destruction were being shown, broadcast across all the television networks, and we had Colin Powell talking about these and showing the satellite images, I was like, yeah, I want to go in there and I want to destroy those things. I want to be with a team of people. Yep, sign me up. Like, that's the work I want to do. I took that. I didn't have the thought of, is that accurate? Is there, how can I find out if this is actually just made up or if this is real? I didn't have that mindset. Like, I wasn't interested in that. I saw something that I felt was wrong. I was aspiring to get to a unit that I was lucky enough to then be a part of, to go and stop things like, or try to have an impact to prevent things or stop things like that with a team of people that I cared deeply about and trust. And that's what I was focused on. So do I agree that there's one side of the story? In a nutshell, I think I do agree, because as I've mentioned, anybody can spin whatever narrative that they want and pitch that to anybody, anywhere in the world. And I don't think any of that has changed. So anyway, man, if you made it this far, hour and a half of me rambling on and interjecting and talking for a lot longer than poor old Mr. Ben Griffin, former 2-2 SAS operator, has spoken, then massive respect to you for sticking around. But thank you also. Appreciate your time and support always. I'll wrap this one up here. As always, the message is the same. Anybody going through any dark times, difficulties, hardships, heartache, just keep turning up, keep staying in the fight. Know that you are more capable than you realize. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. Take one day at a time. Know that the sun will shine again, that better days are ahead, and those better days are closer than you think. So stick at it. I'd like to thank also the people and the person in particular that reached out with regards to this reaction, and for your time and for the explanations and specificity of what it was that you've been after. And obviously also for your kind payment as well with regards to wanting to hear my thoughts around this. That took me completely by surprise. I'm very humbled by it and grateful. So thank you very much for that also. Until the next video, team. as always, go always a little further. Remember, who dares wins and who cares wins. And until the next video, there's a big mana wave coming from me to you, filled with my aroha, respect, appreciation, and gratitude for you all.